Hello, and welcome to an all new episode of Talking About Walkers. I am your host, Kinte, all the way live from Los Angeles, and I'm joined by my one and only co host, the one and only Jen.
Hey, quite an episode. Quite an episode this week.
Yeah, it is. This episode, and just for people to know, this is 123, episode 123 of our podcast, and we are covering the episode called What We Become, which was a Michonne centric episode. It is billed as her last episode. And this episode is kind of partly a what if episode, if you can say that. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. It's also the send off, the Michonne send off. So,
I just said.
yeah, we know we're not going to see her anymore, which is really, really sad.
Well, not really. I mean,
Says you.
I don't think, I don't know. My attitude about it is, you know what? She's outgrown the show, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And, this is great. I mean, she can't be on the show forever. So I'm not on the show, I think. Sorry about that. I'm not saying that, she wasn't great when she was on the show. It's just that, it's probably time for her to move on to greener.
Yeah, from the actress's point of view, I think you're absolutely right. But it's sad for the fans because Michonne is, whenever she is around, whenever she's involved in storylines, it brings some much needed both seriousness to the storylines and also just a sense of Michonne's storylines have always been so hopeful. So it feels a little, it just feels sad to me that we're going to lose that because they've just always really centered on her as having a bigger picture for a lot of things. And we know eventually we're going to lose Ezekiel, and like those things sort of make me sad. The show itself is closing down, but it just makes me sad to see all of these things start to go. That's all.
Wait, how do we know we're going to lose Ezekiel? I didn't.
Well, because it's got throat cancer. I mean, what are they going to do? Decapitate him?
Oh, you're talking about the actor?
No, well, we're talking about the character, right? Because Ezekiel has throat cancer. I don't think that they brought that up just to make it irrelevant.
Right. Okay. So I guess it ain't going to be healed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. My bad. I don't know. I didn't. For some reason, my butt didn't even think about that in that regard. Yeah, shoot me. Anyway.
See, I think about these things, okay, because I oftentimes, especially with this show, I think because it's been on the air for so long, I just have a complicated view, almost a matrix kind of understanding. Understanding maybe is too broad a word, but I have a kind of a very complicated maze of thoughts about all of this stuff. Because I realized that while the show, it's got a finale date, well, not a finale date, but, we know that it is going to run a certain number of seasons. And we know that things are starting to close down, but at the same time, there's still kind of, for me, a sense of, okay, well, all of these things are going to start happening in rapid order succession, and it's going to get, I think, more and more sad. Although, I'm super excited to talk a little bit later in the episode about how they closed the episode. So, maybe there's not just all doom and gloom. Maybe there's some good, bright spots on the way.
Let's hope not. Let's hope that it's not just going to be gloom and doom. Well, it's Walking Dead, of course.
It's a Walking Dead, right? Yeah, it's kind of doom and gloom from the start.
And the one thing that's pretty cool about this episode is there were two actors on this episode from shows that I love, and in the finale part, this, and I think I mentioned it a couple of times on shows that I just finished the second season of Mr. Mercedes, and the redhead lesbian chick from Mr. Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
Her name escapes me. I'm so sorry. Linkletter is her last name on the character. I can't Lou or something like that. I can't remember. She's the redhead at the end of with the black guy at the end
Right.
of the episode, which is so funny that I just finished it and that dovetails right into this, you know. And I'm like, hey, that's her. When I saw her name in the credits at the beginning, I was like, oh crap, you know, like, you know, that was pretty cool. And then also the guy who plays Virgil was on the show The Leftovers.
Right.
So, which is a great show. You know what? I know we have so much stuff to do. I low key want to go back over The Leftovers. I
To
feel
go
like
back over what? I missed that. Go back over what?
I low key want to go back over the left. I want an excuse to
Oh,
watch.
Leftovers. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we got The Witcher. We got a bunch of stuff to get to, but at some point, I would love to have an excuse to go back over that series because I love that series so much, and
Yeah.
I feel like I need to see it again. Like, and I'm not a watch it over kind of guy when it comes to a lot of TV shows and movies, besides like some of the classic stuff. But when it comes to, for some reason, I do want to watch that show again. But anyway, that's me. So,
And just so that you know, a little bit of breaking news from our side on the podcast side. AMC just announced that the April 12th airing for the season finale is no longer going to be happening. They apparently are having some issues with post-production and they simply can't get everything together. And so they are now saying it's going to be a special release sometime later in the year. They just don't have a date. So the whole announcement reads, current events have unfortunately made it impossible to complete post-production of The Walking Dead season 10 finale. So the current season will end with its 15th episode on Sunday, April 5th. The planned finale will appear as a special episode later in the year.
oh wow!
So, so we've got one more episode that we can watch, and then the actual finale for this season, season 10, will take place sometime later when nobody seems to be able to give a good fix on when.
I swear that coronavirus, boy.
It's messing up everything, isn't it?
I know, man. Here it is right here. I looked it up and found that. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Later this year. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, hopefully they'll get it together.
Well, we'll get a little treat later in the year. So,
and I know this is the Walking Dead podcast, but I have to say something. Give kudos to another AMC thing, and that is the show Ride with Norman Reedus. It's a really good show. If you haven't seen it, I don't know if you've seen it, Jen.
I have actually. I mean, I haven't seen every episode, but I've seen many.
I haven't seen every episode, but I saw the episode that with Ryan Hurst on there.
That was exceptionally good.
It was very good. I mean, I never not liked the show. Like, I mean, like every time I watch it, it's always fun. It's entertaining.
Right.
It's just so cool. It's a cool show. And I'll be honest with you, when I first saw the adverts for it, I wasn't interested because I'm not a big reality show, person. And I'm thinking, what is this? Like at first. And the way they got me was he did an episode with Dave Chappelle. And I love Dave Chappelle, so I watched it. And it was so good. I was like, oh, well, I want to watch these shows. So a lot of Walking Dead people have been on there. Stephen Yeun has been on there. Melissa McBride was just on there. I haven't seen that one yet. Right. Andrew Lincoln has been on there. He's very close. That is Norman Reedus, who's the host of the show, is very close with Negan. Harry Dean Morgan. Yeah, I was about to say Stanton, who's a great where he's deceased. And he's been on there a couple of times. So,
and also Norman Reedus is not the same person as. I mean, I know I shouldn't have to say this, but honestly, Norman Reedus is not the same person as Daryl. So his engagement in the series is it's very interesting to see how he comports himself outside of The Walking Dead, and he's a really interesting guy. He's actually got a lot of super interesting things to sort of give you.
Is he really that much different from Daryl, though? Really?
Yeah, he is.
In some ways, okay, I'll give you that. In a lot of ways, that's far off.
He's definitely way more intelligent, I think, than Daryl on the show is.
Daryl's intelligent. He's like one of those rednecks that read. He's definitely not like his brother. So
no, he's not.
And they were both on the show, him and Merle himself.
Right.
So I didn't finish that one, but so I just wanted to throw that out there. If you've seen ads for it or whatever, and you're like, I don't know about it, I have to say it's a great show.
Yeah, give it a chance.
Definitely. All right, so we got that out of the way. So for those who's like, I thought this was a Walking Dead show. Why are you talking about everything but Walking Dead?
It was also, if I could just make one more observation, it was also a phenomenal Talking Dead episode afterwards, where everybody was at their own home or wherever they were talking about the episode, and it, even that was sort of an amazing departure, obviously, from what we normally see, but they managed to pull it together. And I gotta say, the Walking Dead as a both fandom and community, that they have some pretty sticky cohesiveness is the best way I can say it. They when they want something, they get it. So
I agree. I definitely agree. Okay, so this episode is mostly Virgil, or at least in the first half of the episode, is Virgil continuing to take Michonne to the island where him and his family is said to reside. And of course, you pretty much figure out it's not going to be like what he says it's going to be, and that doesn't disappoint. And one thing that I found myself as a viewer was wondering, where this guy was coming from. Like, I knew that there was some deception, but I wasn't quite sure how deep was the deception. I didn't think he was evil. I never thought he was evil, but I knew there was something off or not right with him. So I don't know. Before we get into what exactly it was, what was your thoughts of Virgil leading up to when they did get to the island? What were you thinking about him?
Well, there's this great I don't remember, and boy, I don't want to get it wrong if it was, but I think it was Maya Angelou who had this the saying that goes something like, when somebody shows you who they are, believe it, or something along those lines. And
yeah, it was Maya.
Excuse me. And I feel like we had plenty of advance warning that Virgil was not a good person, or at the very least, a very deceptive person. I mean, like they, basically could have had klaxons in the background going off, because that's how big the warning signs were that things were not as they appear to be with him. And I never once really believed that Michonne was going to come back. Although I think I, had some kind of imaginary fantasy about, oh, how cool would it be if that ended the Whisperers. In a way, I'm actually kind of glad that it didn't. But I someplace in the back of my mind, I always sort of believed that this was a wild goose chase, that this wasn't what was going to happen.
No. Oh, sorry. No, I mean, it was obvious. That part was obvious.
Yeah.
But I never thought that there was something telling me that he wasn't going to be like evil. Like, it wasn't going to turn into where he's like this person.
I actually don't know if he was evil. I don't think that.
No.
I don't actually.
Wait.
Oh,
Let me clarify what I'm saying. I'm
okay.
not saying what ultimately happened. I'm talking about your mind space going to that place. So what I'm saying is, before we actually knew what he was, I was thinking in my head, it was obvious that he wasn't telling the truth. There was something
Right.
off. But my thinking was, I don't think he's going to turn out to be necessarily a bad person or someone necessarily with total evil intent, but it kind of
Gotcha.
gray area, which I feel like it turned out that was the case. But I mean,
Yeah, I
what
think so.
was your mindset before we found out about Virgil?
I don't. I feel like I didn't trust him. I didn't trust him. I think for a number of reasons. One, because Judith didn't trust him, and that to me is like always this big bellwether. The people that Judith seems to put her trust into or doesn't has it feels to me like that's the show announcing that that's what that is. And personally, just watching him, he just seemed creepy. Just really super creepy.
Yeah, Virgil is definitely. You got to think about it though. Living in that kind of headspace and being, there for so long in this world, it'd be kind of hard to be, a regular. You know what I mean?
No
A regular guy. So that's one thing that does make it kind of hard to judge certain people, because it's like, I don't think I'm a regular guy, right? But I think if I lived that many years in that kind of world, I think I would be kind of strange too.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that the benefit that all of our groups in The Walking Dead have a lot to do with being social. And I hate to use our current situation, but people have a hard time being away from each other just for a couple of days. And when you bring in this idea that these people, a lot of people have been isolated or on their own, both because people that they started out this whole thing with died, or because they just simply moved on, without that being social part, it changes you. It turns you into perhaps something that you weren't. And I feel like the character Morgan is such an excellent example of that, where it takes being in a group to reinvent who you are, because when you're on your own, things happen. You being left to fend for yourself, or just being left to your own devices in your head, you make up all kinds of things. And the Virgil character is, so to me, it's actually one of the most heartbreaking characters I think that I've seen, because I do sort of understand on a very meta level that losing your family, that there can't possibly be anything sort of worse than knowing what he knew and still having to deal with it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So we get to the island, we find out that the family's dead, right? For all intents and purposes. And he says, I promised my wife that I'd bring flowers to her grave every day. Which is something that he says quite a bit in this episode. And of course, Michonne is very upset. And then basically he pulls a whammy bammy on her and locks her up, right?
Right.
And then there's some psychedelic moments that happen, okay, so because remember the beginning of the episode, I guess we kind of didn't mention this. They already started the what if when they showed her choosing not to save Andrea's life in the beginning.
That's right.
And when I first saw that too, I was like, wait a minute, is this like, at first I was kind of thrown off. I was like,
are we on an alternate timeline?
Yeah, it's a flashback or something. Like at first, I thought they were gonna replay it, and then I was like, oh no, they're gonna actually, you know, wait, oh wait, she's dead, dying. Wait, whoa, what's going on here? And then oh, but then the what if part plays out even more, where where Daryl passes her up on the street, and then Negan comes and saves her, and then she joins the group. And then I remember very vividly, I don't know if you were on the show at this point, us talking about how Rick's group murders all of, like, so many of the governors, Negan's people. And, they were like serial killers, really. They went and kept murdering people.
Yep.
So in our mind space, we were like, well, is he really that wrong in this world, what he did? It's so brutal because we have a connection, excuse me, to the people that he killed, Abraham and Glenn, that it's like so brutal to us. But really, if you think about it, it pales in comparison to what they did to their group.
There's a great saying about history being written by the victors, right? And that's how I feel like our unnecessarily, that's how our fiction is told to us. Our fiction is told to us by who we're supposed to be rooting for as the protagonist. But The Walking Dead does a really good job of allowing us without sort of giving us or guiding us toward the idea that the bad guys may not be, that basically the bad guys are everybody. We are the bad guys. It's just we are the people who gather together for the purpose that we're going to say is the right purpose, instead of those guys clearly are, they're gathered together for the wrong person. Actually, no, they're all gathered together for the purpose of survival. So it's tough.
It's extremely tough, but that's the world that this is in, right?
I was really glad to see, just in a sort of selfish way, really glad to see Andrea just back as in any capacity and role. It brought back so many memories. And the Michonne thing, seeing Michonne in the role of the antagonist, like you said, with Negan's group, made me also realize that, Negan has gone from being on one side to being on the other. And how amazing is it that Negan himself, that The Walking Dead as a series has allowed Negan to straddle both worlds so effectively, because none of the other characters are able to do that successfully. So, by showing us Michonne in that role, it really does highlight how incredibly successful Negan has been. I as much as this was about Michonne, I had some pretty deep thoughts about how far this whole Negan thing has come.
Yeah. And a lot of people who had the biggest gripes against him are no longer around. So,
Yeah, that's true. And now with Michonne gone.
Right.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. In terms of where Michonne has come from the very beginning, from the beginning that we actually sort of see her in, where she's walking through the forest with her walkers, that to me was such a pivotal moment in The Walking Dead. Obviously, it comes right from the graphic novels and stuff, but the way that they crafted Michonne's character, the way that they gave her a different breath of life, is to me one of the most, I think, successful character arcs of The Walking Dead. Having her be so tied in with Rick, having the whole relationship with the kids, giving her kind of this role of, hey, I want to see like a brand new constitution. or Bill of Rights between all of the different communities. Just watching all of that and experiencing the ups and downs through Michonne's eyes, I honestly, I cannot think of a single time when Michonne was not relatable and likable. I just can't think of any time.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be different without her on the show. So
yeah, very.
So is there any other things that you want to get to besides besides the very end part, and then we'll focus on the end.
I wanted to get your take about what you thought was happening with all of the hallucinogenics going on. What do you think the point of showing us that material was?
I'm not sure. Your guess is as good as mine.
Well, there's things that Virgil says, right? And this is why I was so conflicted about what Virgil was really about. Because in some ways, it felt to me like, Virgil was like trying to right some kind of wrong. Well, let me ask it to you that way then. What did you think Virgil's true intention was in having everybody be locked up?
Honestly, I think that it's part of it is obviously that he was going through a mental breakdown based on what was going on, by losing his family. That set him over. Very similar to Morgan. And I feel like he felt like, here in the island, it makes you see things a different way. And that locks you up, that it'll give you an opportunity to experience that.
So do you think, what was he trying to provide clarity to? I mean, like, because the one hesitation that I have about sort of embracing this episode for being, which I think it actually was a very good episode, but the one thing that I have a difficult time with here is sort of getting to the bottom of Virgil's true intent. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's confusing to me because when he's on the island, I think that couldn't have stood by itself, but the hard part that I have with all of this is him bringing her to the island. Mm-hmm. Like, what was the justification for that? And did I miss something? Because in some ways I kind of feel like maybe I did.
I think that there's something that he saw in her that he felt like this was going to be beneficial to her, much like Morgan with the clear thing.
See, my understanding was that he brought Michonne to the island because he felt like he needed somebody stronger than he was to finally bring him closure with his wife, right? Because his wife was still hanging and he wasn't able to do that. He couldn't bury his family, right? So I feel like, okay, that feels right. I could sort of understand that almost. What I don't then understand is, surely he must have had some kind of plan in mind, or maybe he didn't, and maybe I'm just reading too much into that. But it feels like surely he must have had some plan in mind. Did he plan on doing all of this when he met her, or when he convinced her to come with him?
I think that it was evolving, and that's kind of what happened. Like it was one of those things where it evolved, and then it ended up. That's where we ended up at with him.
I found it a little bit fascinating that the first ghost that she sees is Sadiq.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what was it about?
Well, I mean, are we assuming that Michonne feels a deeper guilt for Sadiq's death?
Probably, yeah.
I don't know. There was some. I feel like there was a lot of ambiguity in this episode, and perhaps very specifically, it was done to sort of throw us off of uh, what the normal course of events might have been. And in some ways, forgive me for saying this. I know the writers do the very best that they can, but I think that that Michonne's leaving the show opened a doorway that needed to kind of have something cross through it, which hadn't been planned on before. So they used what they had started out with to be one story, and it ended up being another story instead. Right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because this didn't feel as well thought out to me as even some of the, thinnest of the Walking Dead stories. It just felt really not bad. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad. It's just it just lacks any depth sort of in it, and what depth I felt like was in it was not really what it needed to be about. And so I don't know. It was a great send off for Michonne, but I just feel like it was kind of like thrown together a little bit differently than maybe they originally intended. I did really like the idea when she goes onto the boat. Okay, well, the boat washed up. Clearly, that boat did not wash up. I mean, that boat is moored. So that's not. If you ever seen a boat wash up, it washes up on the shore. It does not wash up neatly in the harbor.
Right.
So it was left there, not it washed up in on the shore itself. And when she finds the phone, that to me also felt like okay, I see where you guys are going with this, but wow, it felt really what's a good word? Not Deus Ex Machina, but very like all of the how incredibly convenient that all these things come together at exactly this time. I know they needed to do it in sort of this way, but wow, it was just really, it was a little bit almost cartoony to me.
Yeah. And the whole Rick and Michonne thing was never really believable. And like I don't know, and it always felt like she was more into him than vice versa. Because remember how it happened was he was all into the blonde girl, and then she died, and then all of a sudden he's almost like he fell into Michonne. You know what I mean? So this whole Rick and Michonne love thing never worked.
Yeah.
And it was very awkward too. It just it wasn't a good thing. And then we're supposed to believe that they had this deep love for each other or whatever. My thing is, if you're gonna put two characters that were on the show for so long together, you should there and then really make it like they really had a thing. Like you had time to build up to that instead of just haphazardly. I didn't think that was I didn't think they did a great job with that. I never bought it at all. Honestly, it seemed like some stuff they threw together, but
it works for me in the context of not Michonne and Rick, but it works for me in the context of the two of them have an incredible bond through Judith and what's his name. But it doesn't work for me in the sense that the two of them have some kind of timeless bond and passion that brings them together from worlds apart, because we've never, as at least I think you're right. I mean, I know that they've tried to make that be a part of here, make this believable because we say it's believable. But I've never really seen the characters on screen exchange the kind of passion even that Carol and Ezekiel have. And that to me is not a super awesome relationship either, but it is far more believable than the Rick and Michonne one. Now, I could also see that Michonne is inspired by the idea that Rick is alive somewhere, because that means that there was an intent behind taking him, or him being someplace else. And the reason that that's important is because it also signifies that there are other people out there. I mean, I'm sure that the group knows that there, and Michonne knows that there are other groups, but the idea that there is something bigger happening, that to me might be a good reason for Michonne to go off and explore. And we've seen several of those kinds of storylines in Fear the Walking Dead, and it works very successfully because you're always looking for groups of humanity that are going to be strong and solid and give you a good chance of survival. So I could see it from that end, but I really dislike the idea of hinging it all on this epic love story. Or and possibly, if we suspend that for a second and just think about Michonne going off and doing this for Judith, it might help. It might be a little bit of a salve, because I can see that she would go and do this for Judith. That's the only thing that I could come up with at the end.
Ezekiel and Carol made more sense in this regard. There was a courtship. There was a building up to it.
Right.
Whereas, with this, it's just, it's just like it didn't make it. And I honestly, I thought it was disrespectful to the Michonne character, the way that it kind of happened. Like I felt like her character deserved better than that. And
well, it kind of felt like it was just two alpha characters, right?
No, it felt like, not to me. It felt like she was just something to do.
Oh, you mean from Rick's perspective?
Right. And especially being that he was really, remember him and the blonde chick, I forgot what her name was. Like there was a build up to it. You know what I'm saying? There was a courtship, there was a flirtation, and
right.
You know what I'm saying? And then they hooked up, right? So when they hooked up, it felt more real, for both. And then she dies, and then they just jump ahead, and it's like, oh, they're together. And it's like, huh? Like, if anything, her character should have been the opposite, where that should have been a thing, And that's what I'm just saying. And Hollywood has a bad habit of ruining good female characters by making them the girlfriend.
Yeah.
Like,
oh God, yes.
And there's nothing wrong with being the girlfriend or the wife, obviously, but it's just Hollywood tends to have they don't know how to make someone the girlfriend or the wife a lot of times, and then still have them maintain, what makes them great as a character. You know what I mean? And so I don't know, but anyways, I don't want to harp on that.
Well, that is something that I have to say, that as we get to the close of Michonne's story, that is something that, again, that I think is kind of sad. Michonne has been on her own now for almost all of this season, and it has, to me, felt like she finally had sort of come into her own, not needing to have a male character at her beck and call, not needing to have, well, we got to hurry up and settle all of these single characters into a romance and all of that. Michonne didn't have that, and I actually like that, because I that's part of a Walking Dead trope that is really tired and old, which is any single character of worth has to somehow immediately launch into a relationship with another character, because that's the only way that they can find their own worth in the group. And I hate that. I just absolutely hate it.
Yeah. Okay, so what are we to think of the end of this episode? Now I know it's supposed to be a send off and everything, but what do you think? Seeing the battalion or whatever.
Yeah, battalions.
Italians, right? Since this is her send off, does that mean that this dies with, like we never find out what's going on there? Because this was her last episode, right?
Right. Yeah.
So this is just we see it and then that's it. And my girl from Mr. Mercedes, that was the only episode she was going to be in.
See that I don't know, because it is very possible that Michonne's participation with this group will exist, and we won't see it, but then we will get a recap from other people who are in this group, and they will impart what happened with Michonne to whoever it is, and then that will allow for us to sort of have that meetup. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't actually need Michonne in the story in order to continue the story, because I think that group that is walking now, I think it actually is important, and I think it's important to the group because we know that the group can no longer stay where they are. First of all, Hilltop is gone. We know that the only places that are left now are Oceanside and Alexandria, and we don't really have a good resolution. Even though Alpha isn't a problem, the Whisperers are still around, so it's not like that has completely ended. And I feel like what happened at the end of this episode is sort of a precursor to a teaser that will happen in the season finale. That's what I think. I don't know for sure, though. I feel like because we also have Eugene out there heading for Charleston, and Charleston is actually a part of the Walking Dead graphic novel. So, but I don't know. I guess it is going to kind of depend where they go, what they do. Maybe those other people are heading for Charleston. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
what did you think?
I don't know. That's why I was asking you. I'm like part of me was like, oh, this is cool. But then I'm like, but if this is her last episode, that means we're not going to get what's going on with the whole military thing. And I haven't read the comic book in so long, so I don't even know where they're really at. So this will be all 100% new for me. So
don't forget that the people that were at the end, they were dressed up a lot like the the Pioneer guys in that episode where 2 episodes where they were around and kind of helping out back when King Ezekiel was still a King Ezekiel in the kingdom. And so maybe they're part of that group because they were dressed just like that.
Yeah. I don't know. Your guess is good as mine.
I think there's still some intrigue left to The Walking Dead. It's you can feel the gears are grinding down, but I feel like there is still a level of intrigue left to the story. Maybe that's just me being an eternal optimist, but I still appreciate where the story has come from and where there are opportunities for it to go. I'm still very intrigued by what happened between Carol and Negan, and what that might portend, and then what basically or how they either wrap up or deal with the Whisperers that are still around. Because even though they've gotten rid of the Horde, it's not like they've gotten rid of the Whisperers.
Correct. Yeah.
So, that's still a thing.
It is. Indeed, it is. All right. So we shall find out next week, hopefully.
And then that'll be the last one for quite some time until they can get the season finale up and running.
Yes. So how can we get you in social media?
You can find me on Twitter at followingbliss1, and you can check out my websites at moviesmakethemeal.com and studiowhitewolf.com.
And you can get me at Kinte F on Twitter, Kinte Ferguson on Instagram, and of course the website is indyradio.org. That's INDY radio.org. And as I said, we will be back next week with an all new episode. You guys stay safe and God bless you.